Welcome, everybody. Really excited for this conversation with my longtime, I won't say old, my longtime friend, John Green, who, um, when we met, I was a math professor and he was a writer of brief book reviews, working on his first novel. John since became a novelist, who then also became, I don't know what you call yourself, but like an internet star, I guess. Like, a person who's good at the internet. Um, and some of his books were made into movies, and he's subsequently become like a really fascinating and inspiring public health advocate. Most recently, relative to tuberculosis, is like I was not expecting that my 15-year-old child would be like absolutely riveted by a nonfiction book about tuberculosis, but somehow John has pulled this off. And John has for I guess like 15 years now lived in Indianapolis. So we haven't actually lived in the same place since we were both in Chicago in the kind of early 2000s. But we stayed really close, and I'm looking forward to this conversation on a whole bunch of different levels. And I thought, I don't know, I wanted to start by just asking you to tell from your standpoint kind of how we got to know each other and make friends all those those many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you were a math professor, you were a mathematician, and I was very impressed with that. Not least because I don't know, like I barely passed high school math. Like I really struggled in high school math, and here you were, like doing all of this really interesting, really difficult, complicated mathematics. Such that, as I recall, you had, like a position where like most of your job was to think about math and try to do math. And that was just so interesting to me. But then also, like, once I think we met through friends, but then, and I remember, like, one time having a conversation with you where you were talking about Wallace Stevens, we were talking about the poetry of Wallace Stevens. I think we just played pool together, actually. And we were talking about the poetry of Wallace Stevens, and you said the poetry of Wallace Stevens is quite mathematical, and that there wasn't this divide I had imagined between math and poetry, but instead that in your world you saw a lot of similarities in the ways that things can be beautiful mathematically, the ways that things can make sense in terms of math, and then also the ways that poetry can be beautiful and rhythmic and contain within it patterns that were not dissimilar to math from you. And like for me, that was such an enlightening, important conversation. So like that's one of the first times I remember like talking to you in our early 20s and just being like blown away. But then we had so many great times together in Chicago. I mean, I remember I remember going over to a dinner when you and your now spouse had started dating, but I don't think that you were married yet. And there were a lot of mathematicians there. And I think Sarah and I had started dating as well. And man, I mean, a dinner with mathematicians is a fascinating place to be for a writer. Like, I mean, a truly weird experience for a young adult novelist. So those are some of my earliest memories. What about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember that we were introduced by, so like my best friend in high school was basically your roommate at Kenyon,
That's right.
our friend Will, and he was sort of, when I was trying to figure out where to go after grad school, he was like, "No, you got to move to Chicago. It's great, and I'm here, and we'll hang out, and we'll be friends. And I have this great friend group." And then, as I was like in the air moving to Chicago, he moved to California.
Right.
And so my entire plan for my social life was just kind of, you know, m up in smoke. And then I heard you, on WBZ do this radio story, and I was like, "Wait, wasn't that Will's friend?" And I think I
Oh,
just emailed you from that, and, then we,
and became
obviously got
friends.
together and hit it off.
You have a much better memory of how it all began than I do, but I remember admiring you from the beginning as a person with really interesting values and who seemed like actually interested in trying to, live with those values and struggling with the big questions that I was struggling with at the time. And then as I was writing my first novel, we would talk sometimes. And then when I was writing my second novel, we talked a lot because you actually contributed to that book. You wrote the math that's, thank God somebody wrote it. You wrote the math that's in that book. And then we sort of had some great conversations about what this 16-year-old boy's concept of how relationships work would look like mathematically. Yeah, so it just sort of blossomed from there.
Yeah. Well, it's that was a fascinating experience working on that book, by the way.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, it was an interesting time in both of our lives. Like that, that time when you're in your early to mid 20s, when you're trying or late 20s, whenever it is that you're trying to figure out like where you're going to land in the world and who your people are going to be, and you don't feel necessarily a lot of security in your relationships and stuff. That's such a hard time of life, and the fact that you were there with me during those hard years just has meant a lot to me since, and I think is the foundation of our friendship, which has now, I was thinking today, extended for most of my life. It's crazy to think that those years, when I was writing Looking for Alaska and you were working as a math professor, like that was more than half my life ago.
yeah, I'm gonna just change the subject right now, actually.
Sure, sure, sure.
I can't bear to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is kind of
even I'm not even
uncomfortable.
gonna fact check that. I'm just gonna move past it as though it didn't happen. Um, but I have a question for you, which is like a capital Q question.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have undergone some like far more extreme version of an evolution that I've undergone.
I don't agree at all. I mean, if you told me when you were a math professor that you were going to run for Congress someday, I would have been like, there is absolutely no way that this sweet, smart, introverted man I know will one day run for Congress. But yes,
Uh,
go on.
yeah, no, I don't mean professionally. Actually, I mean we'll go back to that later, maybe. But I mean something really specific, which is so like when we were like first hanging out and when I was first getting involved in politics. Um, my first campaign was 2008. It was during Barack Obama's campaign for president. I feel like it was this moment where I had extreme optimism about the internet and what digital technology could do to connect people. And I have just become profoundly concerned and cynical and troubled and terrified about the realities of all that for a variety of, obvious reasons, I think. And I think about your professional arc where you were just like a guy writing books and then somehow became a person on the internet in ways that allowed you to build very, very beautiful and very positive community that was then like became a part of your life and also a part of your job. And then you're also just sort of like watching modern discourse get sort of taken apart by the way that we gather information and the way the internet sorts us and the way that it kind of radicalizes us and all of that. And I feel like the positives that we saw back then were all real, and
Yeah.
I I'm sure they're still there, though they're sometimes hard to dig up under all the nightmares. And I presume that we just kind of misunderstood what the negative might be, just either out of lack of imagination or optimism or something. But I'm just curious how you kind of like how your understanding of what the internet kind of means for how society functions has evolved and what you think is salvageable there.
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly a naivete on my part when I thought about the power of the internet. I mean, I really did think it was going to destroy fascism. I thought it would. I thought open, free access to information would democratize the world, and that was way off.
Maybe the opposite of the truth.
Yeah, it
Maybe
was so far off that like now I look back on that and I try to remind myself when I have opinions about what's happening now that like those opinions are probably going to look equally ridiculous in 20 years. Um, or I hope they will anyway, because my opinions now are also pretty bleak at the moment. I also I share your profound concern about look, the internet connects us in beautiful ways, and there are communities online that I think are life-saving for people and that provide deep, meaningful connection to people. And I hope that I'm part of some of those communities. And so I think there is that internet we loved still exists. It just doesn't exist it's just that another internet also exists that is much louder and right now much more powerful. And you're right that it's divisive. You're right that it has fractured the way people get their information in ways that has facilitated misinformation and disinformation. And that freaks me out. And I don't think that we're at the end of that story. And I don't see any evidence for the idea that it's slowing down or anything like that. And, you told me once, I hope this isn't speaking out of school, but you told me once, like, that for a long, that like my worldview has always been I'm going to bring my bucket of clean water to this dirty soup that is the internet, and thereby do my little part. And you observed to me, I think quite brilliantly, that a lot of times when I do that, I am actually just raising the level of the toxic soup and dirtying what water I have. And that is a big part of the reason why I don't post online as much, to be honest with you. But I still have hope that certain internet spaces can be productive, that they can bring people together, that they can raise money for important causes, that they can do stuff that matters. But yeah, I mean, it's I look back on that time, 2007 to 2010, when Hank and I first started making videos, as a really lovely time in a way, but also, yeah, quite naive.
Do you think the good and the bad are just both inevitable and it's just that's life? Or do you think there's like
No, no, I think that there are structures. I think there's architecture involved. I don't think that the internet we have currently is inevitable, and I don't think it ever was inevitable. So, as Margaret Atwood said, very little in history is inevitable. And so I think that we could build different architecture. I mean, right now, the architectures of the internet incentivize anything that makes you pay attention, anything that will keep you on the site, anything that will keep you scrolling, anything that will keep you present, is incentivized. And of course, what most holds our attention is what outrages or scares us. And so it's going to provide us with a lot of what outrages and scares us. It's also going to provide us with delight. It's also going to provide us with wonder. It's also going to provide us with other things, but like it's going to give us enough outrage and fear to keep us there.
yeah.
And that should freak us out.
When you say architecture, do you mean financial incentive exclusively, or do you mean something else too? Like,
I
it
think
seems
the
to me that financial incentive is what it is, and that makes the people who build it design the architecture to then optimize for outrage and fear, right?
For sure, but there's also a political, architecture to it, right? Like, I mean, Elon Musk has changed the architecture of Twitter, and he hasn't done it only for financial reasons. He's
Right.
done it for lots of other reasons as well.
Yeah. It is a sort of, I mean, there's this is gonna sound very childish, but there is a sort of bizarre paradox that it's simultaneously the most unifying and the most divisive
Yeah.
communications tool in human history.
Yeah, I mean, if you think, Hank, my brother always says that like we're at the beginning of this technological revolution, and like in the beginning of the printing press revolution, there were lots of problems that emerged from the printing press, and yet we don't regret the printing press these days.
Right.
And I mean, I hope that we have a similar story when it comes to the internet or AI or other disruptive technologies. But I think that we are living in a very difficult and interesting time, which kind of sucks, to be honest with you, at least from my perspective. I preferred a less interesting, less difficult time, and I do think that some of our kind of shared nostalgia, which crosses political divides, I think, in
Yeah.
important ways. Some of our shared nostalgia is about that, is about wanting to find some time that we can go back to when things didn't feel this divisive and scary. I do think that, I mean, like the subcultures of the internet that I'm interested in are still very productive and very interesting and full of awesome people doing awesome stuff. And you don't hear about those subcultures because you don't hear about the fact that child mortality declined today. But I think they're real.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for some reason in preparing for this conversation, I've been thinking a lot about Zay Frank and the Earth Sandwich.
Oh yeah,
So
the
like
Earth sandwich.
I'm gonna try to tell this and then you'll tell me what I have wrong. So
Sure.
you and Hank started Vlogbrothers in, if I have my math right, 2007.
Yep.
And you were inspired by, or
Cheating from.
Yeah, I was not going to use the word plagiarized. That seems wrong. This guy called Zay Frank, who had made a video every day and had built, they were like funny and weird and interesting. And he built on those videos that I think existed maybe in a pre-YouTube era. They were like in some other
Yeah,
technical
they were on a
platform.
different website. Yeah.
Um, he built a real community and did cool stuff with them. And he did this thing that I was just so entranced by back then, where he it was very, very simple. He just developed a tool where you had two like Google Map windows next to each other. And the one on you could manipulate where you were on the one on the left, and then the one on the right was automatically the opposite spot on the earth. And he he challenged his viewers to create an earth sandwich, which is where you have two pieces of bread uh, on opposite points of the earth with the earth in between them. And so it was like this funny, weird challenge asking this community of thousands of people to find two people who lived close enough to the opposite spot on the earth from each other to then do this thing together, at the same time. And it was just obviously very, very silly, but there's like a beauty to it because it was kind of in a very little way designing this kind of across the whole world connection between people who were never going to meet in person and had kind of nothing else sort of innately in common. And like to me, that was like the peak of internet optimism of just like,
Yeah.
look, I
We
tell
are
this cool
one world.
story. We are one world, and there are people across the world who are involved in a project together. And today, the project is making an Earth sandwich, and tomorrow, we are definitely curing cancer. And I
Right.
guess to your point, like the tomorrow we're curing cancer isn't totally wrong. There are global projects happening because of the internet that are doing real good in the world, but there's just this other thing that's so much
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, but I think absolutely, and like I don't think Donald Trump becomes president without Twitter, and so it's hard to say that that no, I would never claim like this was good news, um, you know, but I also think at the same time, it's also true that, a small group of TB fighters from around the world came together and lowered the price of diagnostics and treatment for tuberculosis in the last 2 years by like 50%, so that hundreds of thousands of more people can get treated and tested for tuberculosis. And so like that is also real. I don't know how to disentangle this. I don't think that the upsides are worth the downsides, but I also don't think there's any going back. And
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I think we have to try to focus on building better structures, better systems, and frankly, I mean, from speaking to somebody who's running for Congress perspective, better regulations, so that there are some incentives other than just purely whatever you have to do in a surveillance capitalism universe to make people pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time as a guy running for Congress, and I just wonder even how easy that is to unwind, right? Like you could imagine a world where 10 years ago or 15 years ago, certainly, there would have been, some serious regulation or prohibition of, revenue models that rely on ad sales and AI driven, sorting feeds. And then just require internet companies to have other revenue systems. I think it's going to be hard to unwind now, but there's got to be a better regulatory environment than what we have.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about TB?
Sure, always.
Yeah. I'm told everything is tuberculosis.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tuberculosis is our deadliest infectious disease, and we radically, radically underinvest in it because it tends to strike people who live in the margins. It tends to strike people who live in deep poverty, both in the United States and abroad. We have
Yep.
about 10,000 cases of active tuberculosis in the United States every year. We have about 10 million worldwide. So the U.S. is a small part of the story, but an important part of the story because just 100 years ago, we were living in a world where tuberculosis was one of the leading causes of death in the United States, and there were almost as many hospital beds for TB patients as there were for all other healthcare conditions combined. And the only reason we're not living in that world now is because we discovered this amazing cure for tuberculosis beginning in the 1950s, and the cures have gotten better and better and less toxic and shorter regimens, so that now it takes about between 4 and 6 months of antibiotics usually to cure tuberculosis. That's still a lot. It's not like curing a sinus infection, but it's curable. And the fact that we let over 1 million people die of it every year, to me, is an absolute horror story. And the U.S. is the center of that story in many ways, both because we're the center of the development of many of the drugs for tuberculosis, but also because for a long time we were the global leader in the fight against tuberculosis. And the fact that TB death declined by 50% between the year I graduated from college, like between around when we met and last year, TB declined by 50%. And that was, due in large part to US government funding. And that, of course, has gone away. A huge percentage of it has gone away. I shouldn't say all of it's gone away, because and interestingly, it's gone away not because Congress defunded tuberculosis, even amid all the crises around the dismantling of USAID and everything else. There was still an assurance from the administration that they would fund life-saving measures and with PEPFAR and TB response and the Global Fund and other things. And Congress has appropriated a similar amount of money to fight TB as they did a year ago or 5 years ago, but but the money just isn't getting out the door. And the Trump administration is using all kinds of Byzantine tactics to try to make sure that people don't get access to TB medication. And that's a catastrophe, Daniel. I don't need to tell you this because I know you've read my book, but when people can't access their medication or they get their medication cut off in the middle of treatment, they develop drug resistance. And the last thing we want is a totally drug-resistant form of tuberculosis. That is truly terrifying.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about the activism relative to the drug prices and, how that
Yeah.
worked? It's
Yeah.
like a pretty
So
amazing story.
it is an amazing story. So there's this drug bedaquiline that's incredibly powerful in fighting tuberculosis, especially drug-resistant tuberculosis, and it has long been too expensive. It was patented by a company called Johnson and Johnson. Even though it was funded primarily with public money, Johnson and Johnson did put in some money toward the development of the drug, and so they got the patent. And bedaquiline for a long time wasn't very available. People, many hundreds of thousands of people have died of drug-resistant TB because even after bedaquiline became available, because it wasn't available in their communities because it was seen as being too expensive. But it's not expensive because it's like made of platinum or something. It's expensive because that's the price J&J set for it. And so when their patent was about to expire, these amazing activists in India and South Africa came together and sued Johnson and Johnson in Indian courts to try to prevent them from making a secondary patent, which basically there are ways that companies try to evergreen their patents so that the patents last longer than 20 years. They last 30, 40, 50 years sometimes. And that's what J&J was trying to do. The Indian government said, no, this is illegal. This isn't real innovation. And so in India, that's how this drug bedaquiline became available for generic competition. But in the rest of the world, it wasn't until TB activists, including people in our community, the people who watch our videos, came together and very loudly encouraged Johnson and Johnson to abandon their attempts to secondary patent this drug, which eventually worked. To J&J's credit, they did abandon all attempts to evergreen their patent. And today, in fact, just yesterday, it was announced that the price of bedaquiline has gone down a further 30% after going down 55% last year. So, we're entering an environment now where drug-resistant tuberculosis, which just a few years ago cost $3,000 to treat, now costs like $280 to treat.
Yeah.
And that should be the case, not just when it comes to tuberculosis drugs, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you a really stupid sounding question. What exactly is the mechanism by which Johnson and Johnson got persuaded to do the right thing? Like,
That's a
like,
great question.
why could they not just sit there and get yelled at on the internet and continue to overcharge?
They could have, but Johnson and Johnson has a lot of excuse me. Johnson and Johnson has a lot of consumer-facing products. Johnson and
Mhm.
Johnson cares about their public reputation, and they did a calculation that there was $200 million of brand damage being done, and they were only going to make $180 million or whatever from continuing the evergreening of bedaquiline, and so they made the decision not to do this. That's what it boils down to.
Got it. And I don't know the kind of ownership structure of other drug companies. I mean, obviously, a lot of us know that Johnson and Johnson makes all kinds of other consumer-facing stuff.
Right.
So that's just good luck on some level.
Absolutely, and it doesn't work with everybody. So I'll give you another example. There's a company, Danaher, that makes these really great tuberculosis tests, and they pledged to, after a lot of public pressure, they pledged to do an annual audit to make sure that they were making these tests available in poor countries at cost. And they just didn't do that. They just didn't do the audit.
What?
They didn't release the audit. It's not clear that they are making it at cost. They just promised they would and then didn't. And we've put a lot of pressure on them, but Danaher doesn't have a lot of consumer-facing products. They make like solutions for lab testing equipment and stuff that I don't really understand what it is. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot harder to communicate. It's a lot harder to make the case, well, this company should also be publicly shamed and embarrassed, and because you just can't do as much brand damage to them.
Wow. That's fascinating.
So I wish I had a good solution for that problem, but right now I don't. If I did, I would be pushing Danaher a lot harder.
Right. Right. But yeah, it's this kind of thing where consumer activism is a lot easier than shareholder activism, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I am also a Danaher shareholder, and I have attempted some shareholder activism by becoming that's why I became a Danaher shareholder. But it's a lot harder, and and frankly, like, the incentives don't line up. I mean, most shareholders want a return on their investment.
Yeah, I mean, like, you were very clear, right? Johnson & Johnson made a financially driven decision,
Yeah.
and you're asking Danaher to make the opposite of that.
Yeah, on some level. I mean, I think that ultimately, I don't think people like working for companies that are doing ill in the world. I
Yeah.
don't. I think that the people who work at Danaher and Johnson are deeply committed to trying to make good tests and treatments available to more people, and so I think it's bad business to be abandoning your employees and their values. But it's obviously we have woven a very complicated web when it comes to this stuff, and I wish I had easy solutions for it, but I don't.
Well, and yeah, and it's, as you said, we've woven a very complicated web. I mean, the interaction of capitalism and medicine is messed up. It was really, really,
Yeah, yeah,
really messed up.
it really is messed up, and it's we are really the only country in the world that treats healthcare as a purely market-driven phenomenon. And it's really messed up. It's caused a lot of suffering, and it will continue to cause a lot of suffering as long as it's the case.
And just to state the obvious, because of the role that we play in the global economy and the global research infrastructure, our poor choices for America are devastating to literally billions of people not in America as well.
Absolutely. Although that will less and less be the case the more we retreat from uh, our ability to export goods effectively. But yes, that is true.
Yeah. How'd you get so fascinated by TB?
I met a kid. I was in Sierra Leone to learn about maternal health there. My wife and I have invested for a long time in maternal health, and we were in Sierra Leone to learn about that. And then on the last day we were there, one of the doctors we were traveling with asked if we could go to a TB hospital because they had some patients they wanted to consult on. And I met a young kid named Henry Ryder, Henry is also my son's name, and Henry took me all around the hospital, and um, he seemed really well. He seemed pretty healthy. I mean, he was small, but he seemed okay. He was able to walk and everything, and I thought he was fine. I actually thought he was probably like the kid of a doctor or something. And then when I eventually found out that he was a patient, and in fact that he was really, really sick and was probably going to die, I I just came home wondering what the hell was wrong with my information feed that I had no idea. I ingest information all day and I had no idea that the deadliest infectious disease in the world is tuberculosis and that it's been curable for 70 years. And so following Henry's story over the next 5 years as he tried to get cured of drug-resistant TB and the Ministry of Health in Sierra Leone tried to help him and his doctors tried to help him and Partners in Health tried to help him really just affected me very deeply. So that was why I got interested in TB and why I started reading about it and then eventually why I wrote the book.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like, I don't know. Like, what is society? Society is we come together and tell stories about who we are and what our values are, and it
Yeah.
there's something really, really, really frightening about a society that just allows this kind of preventable suffering to
Yeah.
by inertia, right? It's not even really malice.
It's not malice. It's inertia and it's whose stories do you listen to? Which
Yeah.
voices are you hearing? And I wasn't hearing Henry's voice. It wasn't that it's not that, you know, a lot of times I've heard like on Capitol Hill, where you'll be soon, and I'll be visiting you to bug you about this. On Capitol Hill, I'll talk to people and
For the
they'll
record, I
say,
look forward to that.
I look forward to it too. It's going to be great. It's good, always good to have a hang session. Um, on Capitol Hill, I often hear from people that, tuberculosis just doesn't have a constituency the way that HIV does, for instance. And, because of the incredible, incredible work of HIV activists and advocates over the last couple of decades, we've seen HIV death go down so dramatically. It's an incredible success story. I mean, PEPFAR is one of the greatest things America has ever done. And it's been a huge success. It's not without problems, nothing is, but it has really been transformative in what's available in terms of care globally. And they'll be like, HIV has a constituency, even malaria has a constituency, TB doesn't have a constituency. And malaria's constituency is we don't want malaria to come here. But TB, they'll say TB doesn't have a constituency. And I'll say TB has a huge constituency. You're just not hearing them. You just don't hear
Yeah.
them. You don't know those voices. They're not on Twitter. But like, it's not that TB doesn't have activists or advocates. It's that TB doesn't have the megaphones. And so I wanted to try to lend my megaphone to tuberculosis just because I feel like it's not the only important problem we face, certainly, but it's the problem I've decided to focus on.
Yeah. So so I was in the legislature in Springfield for 8 years, and we would there was this whole language that you had to learn to operate there because words mean different things in that
Right.
context, like they do in a lot of places with, um, subcultures and whatever. And at least back when I was there, there would be like a there would be a committee hearing and a bill would get announced, like, "Hey, we're about to debate and vote on this bill," and the opponents and the proponents would be enumerated, and then sometimes the chair of the committee would be like, "Hey, there's no opponents," and what what that meant was not there were no human beings in the state of Illinois who didn't want the bill to pass. What it meant was in that ecosystem of the Capitol, where there was a certain list of people who had been deemed to count, essentially, I mean, it's more complicated than this, but at a high level, basically, you count if you've hired a lobbyist and you don't count if you haven't. If nobody on that list has raised their hand and said, "I've got a problem with this," the the behavior is as though there's unanimous support across the state.
Right.
And so there's this very literal process that r- de- decides whose voice counts and deems every other voice in the entire state to be kind of irrelevant to the legislative process. And it was so second nature to people there that I think people stopped noticing what that language choice really was saying, but it was saying a whole bunch of people are irrelevant and silent and are not going to have their voices be a part of the lawmaking process. And I don't know, I found it very troubling, I guess I would say, that the you know the legislature is supposed to be some kind of facsimile of the public will being turned into the things that we do collectively. And it was really, really insensitive to massive swaths of the actual public.
Right. Right, and the parts of the public that are supposed to be best represented by a democracy, parts of the
Exactly.
public that are supposed to be, most included, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're part of an entity that can, have pay somebody to be there on your behalf, full time, in a suit, then you count. And if you're not, kind of it's sort of a roll of the dice.
Right.
Um, which is, I think that's exactly what it's like people's worst fears about democracy kind of come true in this very crystallized way. Um, and I don't think we have great answers for why people are supposed to still have hope in the system, given that kind of status quo.
Yeah, I have a lot of, I have a lot of sympathy for young people who don't have a lot of faith in the system because why would they, right? I think about this in the context of Sierra Leone. One of the big arguments was people, in the early 2000s, one of the big global health arguments was, well, people don't use the healthcare system in these poor countries, so there's no need to invest in them because people don't use healthcare. They have different ways of interacting with their health than the healthcare system. And the proper response to that is maybe they don't use the healthcare system because they can't trust the healthcare system because the healthcare system doesn't do good. It doesn't work. It doesn't provide anything. There's no, you walk into a hospital in Sierra Leone in 2014, there would be no paid staff. There would be no functioning x-ray machines. There would be no running water, no electricity. Like, what about that makes you think that you should have faith in this? And I think that's true for systems in the United States as well. If people can't trust the system, why are we asking them to invest and believe in the system that has failed them over and over again? And I think it raises some big questions, especially for young people, but for all of us really, about what we need to do to make people believe in the system again. And I think what we need to do is make the system work better.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. Like I think talking is not the answer. Theorizing is not the answer. I just think delivering things that make an actual difference in people's real lives and are viscerally felt is the only answer.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I do think that, and to be partisan for a second, the Trump project relies on exhausting and demoralizing people who don't like it. Right?
Right.
He will not be successful if everyone who disagrees with what's happening right now rises up, and he will be successful if almost all people who are dissatisfied with what's going on right now just are just like, "Screw it, it's hopeless, it doesn't matter." And so, I'm very, very wary of kind of, stoking the cynicism, and
Right.
giving too much voice to it, because we have to be willing to try to rise up because the alternative is just do nothing and concede. Um, but like you said, I don't blame people uh, who look at the output of the U.S. federal government over the course of the last decade, let's say, and say like, why why is this a project that I'm supposed to believe in, right? So
Yeah.
it's very. I mean, part of what it's interesting, right? I've been in state government and now I'm in local government. And I'm running for Congress because I feel like the level of emergency in Washington is just unbelievably extreme. And that is where the most important fight of our time is. And so I want to do my part. At the same time, I've been mayor of a sort of medium small town for the last 4.5 years, and like you can do a lot of things, right? And
Yeah.
so we've created a reparations program, and it's up and running, and it exists, and over almost $6.5 million of reparations have been distributed. And not only is it the right thing to do, and not only does research show that the great majority of Evanston residents of all races uh, support it, but the research also shows that Evanstonians have an increased level of trust in their own government, which is like the most unsurprising thing in the world because they saw their government confront a hard problem and do a thing, right?
Right.
Perhaps an imperfect thing, certainly a very far from complete thing, unquestionably a controversial thing, but like, hey man, they did a thing, they moved resources to make things better. That that cuts against the kind of dude, it's all
Yeah, and I
hopeless,
think
right?
people feel, I mean, I think yes, yes, I absolutely agree with you, and I think people feel the ways I think a lot of times people don't feel the ways that government works, they feel the ways that government doesn't work. I think about this all the
Yeah.
time when I'm driving on Indianapolis's roads. You know, like, I don't know our mayor, I'm not, like, friends with him or anything, but I think about him all the time because when the roads have a lot of potholes, I think, "God, you know, Joe should really do something about this." And then when the roads don't have potholes, I don't think about him at all,
Right. Right.
you know, because the roads don't have potholes, so I'm not thinking about him. So I think that factors into it too, but yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you, like, there was this, when I was a kid, there was this mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, who ran on the platform, "Let's do something." Not necessarily something good or bad, Daniel, but something.
Anything at all.
Anything at all.
Anything at all.
He eventually went to prison, but,
Probably because he did something though.
he did something. He did something according to a jury of his peers. But yeah,
Um,
no, I mean, the problems you're trying to solve are so, interesting and difficult, and I think sometimes we don't give enough credit for how interesting and difficult they are.
so part of it is definitely what you said. Like you notice the potholes and not the road that doesn't have potholes. Notice when the water gets shut off or is not clean, but not when you turn on the tap and the water comes. And we could give 10 million examples like that. There's another thing though, which I think is different and I think uniquely American, which is this intense skepticism of government in particular. Like
Right.
people love to complain about the DMV. And the DMV is a pretty annoying place to go. And I understand the complaints. But like, when's the last time you called Verizon and how'd that go for you?
Yeah.
Right? Like large, complex bureaucracies are annoying to deal with. And that's true in the private sector as much as in the public sector, in my experience. But like we have this story we tell ourselves in America that government is somehow inherently bad at everything and inefficient and corrupt. And so when we see government do something that reinforces any of those biases, we just instantly kind of feel like, yeah, man, there they go again. Whereas again, I don't usually have a great time talking to health insurance companies or the cable
Yeah.
company or what have you. And it's just because being a person is hard and organizing large, complex entities in ways that are user friendly is tough to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I want to sort of inartfully change the subject a little bit. I don't exactly know why you became an author. Like you love books, obviously is part of it, but I imagine that part of it was a vision of how to do good in the world through storytelling and creating human connection. Um, and so I feel like you've experimented with a lot of extremely different versions of what it is to do good in the world. And I'm wondering, like, how you think about that now. Like, how do you decide? I mean, obviously, there's a personal satisfaction and question, and there's a practical question too. But like, when you wake up tomorrow morning and you're trying to figure out how to do something meaningful, how do you allocate your time between writing and addressing the public health work that you do?
I definitely allocate it inefficiently. You know,
Are
I
you
took it.
saying you're a human being? Is
Yeah, no, I mean, not even like a particularly productive one. My brother is a very productive human being, so I actually get to see productivity up close, and it looks exhausting. You can never take a nap. Um, I do, I don't think I started writing because I did start writing because I wanted to connect with people and I wanted to ask big questions with readers. I mean, I think writing is a career for introverts who want to tell you a story, and so I wanted to do that. I never imagined when I started the extent to which, and I guess I understood this in the abstract because I had experienced it myself. Like the books that I read when I was a teenager that really lit me up, like changed my life, changed my world, expanded my world, and made me a more interesting, empathetic person. And they really had a profound impact on me. I did dream that my books would do that for some small number of people, and I hope I've been able to hear from people over the years and about and that means the most to me of anything that I've ever done in my career. But then I also get frustrated sometimes by writing because it's the opposite of immediate, and it's also the opposite of it doesn't lower it's not tangible in the way that like lowering the cost of a tuberculosis test is, or the way that expanding access to treatment is, or even in the way that like raising and donating money is. And so sometimes I think like, oh, I shouldn't be writing at all, I should be focusing on this other stuff. And then other times I think like, oh, I should just be writing because it's when I'm happiest and most personally fulfilled. And I don't really know how to navigate that tension, to be honest with you. I kind of navigate it by vibes. Like some days I feel more like writing and some days I feel less like writing.
Yeah. Um,
We have a question in comments. What are the titles of those books that influenced you strongly as a teenager? Great question. Real quick, let me just say a few books. Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. I'm currently in a place where Kurt Vonnegut's mother hung out. Kurt Vonnegut's mother owned all the land like around my house, including this very shed. Um, and that book had a huge impact on my life. Toni Morrison's Beloved, I mean, massive ongoing impact in my life. Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, Catcher in the Rye. Those books like just really, really made me feel less alone in the world, but also like
mm,
helped me imagine lives outside of myself. So they weren't just mirrors, they were windows. They were ways into other lives. And like one of the weird things about being a person that you feel most acutely, I think, when you're a teenager is the extent to which you are stuck inside of one body and can only see the world through one consciousness. And like, to me, reading and writing are the closest ways we have of trying to imagine with clarity what it's like to be someone else.
what do you mean? So I that what you said shocked me. Like I think of, and maybe this is just my own failings as a person. Um, I think of myself as a teenager, at least, as the absolute hitting bottom of my ability to conceptualize
Yeah.
the world through
No,
other
that's what I
people's
mean.
eyes.
Yeah, that's what I
Oh, I
mean.
see.
Like
I
that you
got it.
can't conceptualize other people. You're so drawn into yourself. You're so self-absorbed. You can't escape yourself at all. And then books are a
Oh, and
bit
then
of
when a book
a book.
jolts you out of that, it just
Yeah.
totally changes your view of humanity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I see. I see.
That's my theory about why the books that I read as teenagers affected me in a way that the books I read as adults don't. I mean, I love books. I still love reading books. They still give me that gift, but they don't like jolt me awake in the same profound way that I experienced when I was a teen.
Interesting. So, like, what's the last time that a book has really, I don't know the right phrase then, but just really inhabited your mind?
I mean, I read this book by Paul Farmer, the great global health physician who died a few years ago, called Pathologies of Power, that really changed the way I think a couple years ago. And I mean, so and fiction can still do it sometimes. I mean, fiction still gets me really excited. Uh, but I think maybe actually, Daniel, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's not that the jolt is different. Maybe it's closer to the fact that the jolt isn't new. Like when I was 15, I'd never experienced it's like falling in love for the first time. You know, you fall in love for the
Yeah.
first time and you're like, nothing like this has ever happened, not just to me, but to anyone.
Right.
And then you fall in love for the second time and you're like, this is nice. This is like the previous time that it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I do find myself, like, able to remember in detail passages of books that I read when I was, 15 more often than
Right.
passages of books that I read when I was 35, but I've also just chalked that up to, like, regular old neurological decline, just, like,
There's some of that for sure.
straightforward aging.
There's some of that for sure. Like I'll read a novel now and I'll be like, that was great. And Sarah will be like, what was it about? And I will be like, no, I don't really remember.
You should read and find out, Sarah.
It was very
And then you should
enjoyable.
tell me.
I could read it next week and probably have the same experience.
Got it. Do you still write fiction, though?
Yeah, I've been writing fiction for the last 6 months. So I've taken almost 10 years away. I mean, I've been chipping away at a story set in Hollywood for since 2018, but kind of not real focused on it. And I thought I was going to focus on it, and then I ended up writing everything as tuberculosis because that just became sort of insistent in my mind. But
Mhm.
for the last 6 months, I've gone back to that Hollywood novel, and it's been really fun to go back to and interesting for me, to think about fame and celebrity and the internet and the ways that this machine of content creation both enriches people and impoverishes them. Both gives a lot to them and also takes a lot away.
Yeah. Do you like I think it's fair to say there was, like, a period about a decade ago when you were, like, a full-on properly famous person.
Yeah.
Did that change like, what did that do to you?
Made me want to not be a full on properly famous person, Daniel. It was Sarah said once, it's not the worst thing that ever happened to you, but it is the worst pleasant thing that ever happened to you. Um, it wasn't for me.
Okay.
I really wanted
Sounds
to
like
have,
the, title of a David Foster Wallace essay.
yeah. I really wanted to have I really wanted attention. I really wanted to be successful and I was really ambitious and I really wanted that very badly. And, sometimes I act or I think try to communicate like I didn't want it, but I did. And but sometimes you get something that you wanted and it turns out that you don't like it, like and I didn't like it much.
Do you think that desire people have to have attention is, like, an innate human thing, or is it not to go back to where we started, but is it an artifact of the way the internet has sort of turned us all into kind of broadcasters?
I mean,
Or
I was
even
a
just the way
very
the internet has kind of conditioned us to view attention as some sort of, like, dopamine thing.
yeah, I don't think it just conditioned us to. I think it does provide dopamine.
Yeah.
I don't know because I think I wanted attention and I wanted, social status. I wanted to be cool to my peers before the internet. I lived before the internet barely, and I think I wanted that. I think some of it is because I, really struggled socially in school and wanted for what I didn't have in school, as a kid. And I think some of it is innate. Like we do want to receive some kind of, we do want outside affirmation. It's hard to have enough internal drive and enough internal affirmation to not seek it from outside. The problem is that you think like, oh, if I had some outside affirmation, it would work. Like it would make me feel less sad or it would fill the hole inside of me or whatever. And it doesn't work. And then you get confused and you want more of it because you're like, well, more of it would work.
Right.
Because it's almost works. It's sort of something adjacent to working. And so you're like, man, if I just had a little more of it, it might work. If I just won an award, it might work. If I just was, famous, it might work, whatever. And it never works. And so eventually I had to accept that like it wasn't going to work and try to find something else to do. But I still struggle with it big time. I mean, I still I still struggle with like I still want our videos to do well. Like when I make a video, I still want it to get a lot of views, and I still want to, I still want my books to sell well. I'm not. I'm in no way liberated from this desire for attention as much as I'd like to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because the hole that it's not filling is some probably pretty specific other thing. Like, we crave real human connection, like, that's
Yeah.
real. We crave meaning, right? We crave mutual understanding and understanding of ourselves. Like, we those are the things, and, like, we all know that, that's kinda obvious. But, yeah, I think
But
w
fame and celebrity are like sort of provide a dirty fuel for some of that stuff, but they don't. But for me, the fuel was so dirty that it wasn't worth it. Like it was kind of destructive,
yeah.
and then it turned out that like actually the experience wasn't very pleasant. Like the experience of not being able to go to Target without having a bunch of people talk to you was or like I remember one time I was in a grocery store and I turned a corner and somebody started screaming, like panicked screaming, and I
Like, you
turned
like
around to see
like
what
you
the
are the
emerg
Beatles? Like, that kinda thing?
well, I thought that there was an emergency behind me, and so I turned around to see what the emergency was, and then I realized that I was the emergency, and, like, being the emergency is not very pleasant, like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I I am not nostalgic for those days, but, I am very grateful that I had them because otherwise I would never have realized that I would not be nostalgic for them.
Well, but I mean, also, and I think we should probably end just because 'cause you've been very generous with your time, but I think, like, to me, the thing is that weird thing you went through gave you an asset, and now you're
Yeah,
use now
so
but
many.
you're using those assets to save people's lives across the world,
It
right? So
gave me
that's
so much. It gave me so much. I mean, it gave me, it was such a gift, and, the success of The Fault in Our Stars has been such a gift to me on every level. I've gotten to meet with so many young kids living with cancer or other serious illnesses. I've gotten to, had the privilege of working with Partners in Health because of it. I've gotten, it's so many gifts. So how can you say like you're not grateful for all of these gifts? Like, of course I am. And now I get to gifts it without having to be properly famous and get to like just hang out with my buddy on Substack Live. So it's pretty good, like, um, yeah. So it all worked out in a really lovely way, and I'm really grateful for how it worked out. But part of the reason it worked out is because I stopped chasing some of that cheap dopamine.
yeah. No, but I do I'm gonna just say it again because 'cause you're too modest to say it yourself, like, life is full of coincidence, and life is full of good fortune and bad fortune and being confused about what you really want and pursuing the wrong thing and then maybe getting it or maybe not, or maybe getting the right thing by accident. One of the fundamental questions is, what do you do with the good fortune that you have? And the choice to then be like, well, as a person with a really big platform, I'm going to get obsessed with tuberculosis and then point not only my attention, but the people who care about my opinion at the corporations that need to change their behavior. Like, that's a really thank you, and like, that's a really good lesson, I think, for all of us, which is life is very confusing. You wander around and you find surprising tools you didn't know were there. And the fundamental question is, are you going to use them to do a good thing, or are you not? And use them to do a good thing. And that's kind of the point, I think.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. It means a lot to me because I do take our friendship very seriously, and I'm very grateful for it. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for this. It's good talking to you.
Always good to catch up, man.
You-
Really nice to talk with you, and really excited to see how the next 6 months go, and beyond that into November, and just rooting for you every step of the way.
yeah, and whenever you come to hassle me in Congress, I will be there. I will be available, and I will make time.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm gonna say like we got to meet with this guy who already agrees with me. It's gonna be my favorite meeting of the day.
All right, friend. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so
All
much.
right, take care. Thanks for
Bye.
being here, y'all.